Everybody, adab, namaste, vanakkam, marhaba, and hello to all the teachers joining us today on Facebook and Zoom.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'll say hello and hola and kaixo. I live in a trilingual area, a bilingual area in the Basque Country. So we love hearing hellos from different countries in the world. So why don't you write in the chat or in the comments all the hellos and all the languages you know. Um, I'll tell you a little bit about Huma before she starts. Huma is a teacher mentor, a materials writer, an e-moderator, and an examiner. She's from India, but now she works in the UAE. She has taught all over the world. She has taught students from many, many different nationalities and cultures, and that's really what she's interested in, an authentic learning experience in a multilingual classroom. We're really glad to have you today. How are you doing today, Huma?
Thank you, Melissa. I'm glad to be here, super excited. I'm
Me
doing well,
too.
thank you. How about you, Melissa?
Yeah, I'm really good. Just to let you know, Huma, I'll be here if you need me, but I'll hand over to you now to start the webinar.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I can see a lot of hellos from different parts of the world. That's lovely. It's amazing to see the different languages floating in the world around us. So, again, hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's discussion about multilingual lessons from my classes. As you know, my name is Huma. I'm an Indian, but I live and work in Dubai. Well, I have seen some of your pre-webinar survey responses, and I'd like to get a sense of your expectations from today's webinar. So, could you tell us one thing you'd like to get out of this webinar in the chat box? And if you're watching me on Facebook, then in the comments box. So I can try and respond to your needs and interests. Hello, Imdad. Imdad says collaboration. Pontus says a lot of new experiences. Please forgive me if I end up mispronouncing your names. I'm not good with names at all. Freddie says managing multilingual classes. Corin says learning more. Hello, Lala. Some games. Some new. Salima says new experiences. Zaina says efficient and practical doable ways of L1 integration. Siham says develop awareness of multilingualism and new techniques to embrace it. Lovely. Thank you very much for all these ideas. I'll try my best. I'm going to share my experiences and strategies and ideas from my classroom. I hope you find them useful, interesting, and engaging. So let's get on with my presentation here. So what are we going to do today? In today's session, we're going to start off by understanding the importance of multilingualism. Then we look at creating a linguistically inclusive physical environment. Subsequently, we'll explore some practical ideas for integrating students' languages. This is my favorite part. And before we conclude with some lessons from my classroom by evaluating the impact on student engagement and language learning. There's also Q&A at the end, so please don't forget to add your questions to Q&A. All right, so let's begin by understanding the importance of multilingualism. Now, when I started researching multilingual teaching in my classroom, I spent some time studying student behavior when they talk to each other in shared languages in the classroom, and I discovered 4 typical situations. Here are some examples. The student names are fictional. Situation 1, where students slip into their language for checking meaning and clarifying something. Situation 2, when they can't think of something in English, they substitute their languages. 3 is pretty typical, as you know. And number 4, students mash up languages when they run out of ideas in English. So, which of these are true of your classroom? Could you number your responses in the chat box? Corin says all. Gungor says all. Svetlana says one. Okay. Well, I'm getting a lot of all all from the audience. That's true. So this was the first piece of reality that hit me, that when there are two or more learners sharing the same language in the classroom, code switching and code mixing, code here obviously refers to languages, are inevitable. Yet as language teachers, as English teachers, it's interesting that we often see languages in a compartmentalized manner. English is English, Arabic is Arabic, and we expect our learners to turn off their languages when they come to the classroom, when that may not be very authentic and realistic for our learners. So that was about my classroom. There are other reasons why we should be integrating learners as languages into our classroom. This is a gap fill activity. We are going to play a game called Fastest Finger First. So the first response in the chat box earns a point. So I'm going to try my best to keep my eyes on the chat box. So the first one, multilingual teaching helps us embrace our learners' id and k. Who's going to give me that one? That's right, Corinne. Well done, Francesca. Identities and culture. That's right. Number two, it aids in language teaching. What's number two? Decrease, so develop. Well, the clue is we've got to think about unpacking those power imbalances between languages in the classroom, decoding, developing. Got so many different answers here. Developing. Okay, that's an interesting word. It's decolonizing language teaching. Decolonizing. Number three. Oh, that's a giveaway, isn't it? That's easy. That's right, Francisca. It's native speakerism. I think number two and three are very important because teachers who are foreign speakers of the language, like me and so many of you here today, we've been denied access to our languages and our students' languages, and by extension, our culture and their culture in the classroom. And I think it's high time we revisit this practice. The next one, Hue language learning. Clue, my name's a part of this word. That's right, Francisca. Oh my God, so many points to Francisca. Humanizing language learning. Now, as we all know, in today's world where the displacement of people and the influx of refugees are on the rise, humanizing language learning has become crucial more than ever. I'd like to quote UNESCO's 2019 Global Education Monitoring Report, which suggests that multilingual education helps preserve cultural identity, making refugee children and others feel valued and respected. In other words, it can enhance their sense of belonging and integration into the new society. And the last one, uphold E and S. A clue for you, these are acronyms. Ethical, sympathy, oh, well, these are acronyms. Okay, Melika, you're close. Melika, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name. Acronym. Okay, I'm going to give it to you. Well, I've got a lot of answers in the chat box suggesting equality, ethical, empathy. Well, EDI values and SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So, in my opinion, it is unthinkable to demonstrate equality or value diversity or be inclusive in the classroom or achieve the Sustainable Development Goals without treating all languages equally in the classroom. This means that for promoting social justice and equity, we need to dismantle linguistic hierarchies and prejudices. Also, the British Council's recent Future of English research paper also suggests that we deliver a curriculum that supports the simultaneous use of different languages for supporting language learning in our classroom. All right, so now that we know why multilingual teaching is important, let's think about our context. So, who are our learners? Who are your learners? Are they monolingual, bilingual, or multilingual? Well, my learners are multilingual. I teach multilingual classes. I usually teach adult learners in Dubai. I've got multilingual classrooms with anywhere between 3 and 10 different languages at any given time in my classroom. Aisha says bilingual. Siham says multilingual. Monolingual. Venus says bilingual. All right, Gungur, I'll try to. But you can also look at the slides later, Gungur. Monolingual, yes. It doesn't matter whether your learners are monolingual, bilingual, or multilingual. What is important is how we actually incorporate their languages in our classroom. It's also important to remember that these categories are not as simple as they seem because linguistic identities are pretty complex. For instance, I'm a multilingual. I know 5 different languages, but I'm rather embarrassed to share that I cannot read and write in my first language. That's true, which means that I'm not a native speaker of any of the languages I know. So, complex identities, of course. Who are we as teachers? By this, I mean, do we have full knowledge of our students' languages, working knowledge, or zero or little knowledge? If you ask me, well, you'll find me at the bottom of this pyramid. I've got zero or little knowledge of my students' languages. Mohammed says working knowledge. S- some people have full knowledge of their learners' languages, working knowledge, full knowledge. Valerie says, was that Valerie who said little knowledge? That's right. So the point that I'm trying to drum home is today is that it doesn't matter whether your students are monolingual, bilingual, or multilingual, and whether you have full knowledge or little knowledge of your students' languages. The ideas and activities that we're going to explore today are all inclusive, which means they can be adapted to different situations. All right, so now that we've thought about our context, let's move on to thinking about creating a linguistically inclusive physical environment. So we're talking about the physical classroom space here. So, how can we help our learners see themselves and their languages in the classroom? So, what do you do to make your classroom space more all languages inclusive? Corin says TPR. Language maps, yes, that's interesting. Tesfaye. Print rich environment, that's wonderful, Mazan. Pictures, showing different languages, bilingual dictionaries, posters. Wow, wonderful ideas coming from everybody in the chat box here. That's true. So it's very useful to include labels and other functional print in English and other languages. It's also important to make sure that these prints are of equal size, which means we are going to demonstrate equality. What about learning materials? Videos, absolutely, Nagla. Apps, yes, indeed. Flashcards, lovely. Celine says using songs. Th- Salima says using flashcards. Zaina says realia. Valentina says videos, wonderful. Yes, that's right. So we could also use instructional tools and other visual cues that incorporate learners' languages. For example, this is a vocabulary wheel from my class and students included their languages too in the vocabulary wheel. Also, we could ask learners to bring materials from their home cultures. I think this is very important for making our learners feel valued and respected, also for making them feel included and building on their prior knowledge in the classroom. So now that we've spent a little time thinking about the classroom space, let's move on to explore some practical ideas for integrating our students' languages. We're going to start off with some activities that we can use to kick off the first lesson week or term activities. First lesson week or term, I think that's a very important time to build a sense of community and a sense of belonging in the classroom. So here are some activities that we could use incorporating our learners as languages during the start of the school term or any new term. So here we go. So what do you think is the most important part of our identity? Culture, Lawrence says culture. Traditions, language, nationality, self awareness, culture. Yes, those are all correct answers. Nationality, ethnicity, religion, culture, lots of cultures in the chat box. Well, in my opinion, it all begins with our name. Isn't that true? So this activity is called My Name, My Story. In the chat box, I'd like you to tell us what language is your name in, what it means, a fun fact about your name, and things you like best about your name. So let me go first. Well, my name is both Persian and Arabic. It's a mythical bird. It's a bird of paradise, which is supposed to bring good luck and good fortune to people around this bird. I don't know how true that is because if you ask my husband, I'm sure he might have a different story to tell. Nevertheless, a fun fact about my name is that there are 13 places in 11 countries that are called Huma. That was quite fascinating when I found that out. And things I like best about my name are, well, my name's short and it's easy to pronounce. So this is an activity that you could do with your learners. I've also got a student recording here that I'd like to play with you. I'm not sure if I can share sound. I'm afraid I don't think I can share sound here. All right, no worries. Well, so let me go to the chat box. Galina says her name means calmness, tranquility. That's amazing. Vinny says it's a Welsh name. Lauren says it's Latin, of Latin origin. It's named after an actress. Fantastic. Aisha says it means pious. Siham says it means arrows in Arabic. That's interesting, Siham. So lots of different ideas, wonderful ideas in the chat box. So at the end of this activity, you could also get your learners to present this information visually through posters or a collage, or they could also make a name placard like this one that AI has generated for me depicting my name. So you could also use AI tools to get your learners to incorporate their languages in the classroom. So that was about names. Let's move on to the next activity, which is about the community. It's called My Lingua Community. All right. So okay, so as you can see here, I've got a community map here. So I would like you to think about places that you regularly visit in your everyday life. It could be your favorite restaurant or a grocery store or a supermarket, your workplace or any other place. So can you tell us in the chat box places that you regularly visit in your daily life and the languages that you use in these places? Walia says shop. And which languages do you use at this shop, Walia? School, Aisha says English. Sukur says Sindhi, market. Okay, Arabic at supermarkets, English and Yoruba, Ethiopian, Swedish, on the bus. That's interesting. Shopping mall, a mix of Arabic and English. Hindi at the market. Amira uses English at cafes. Lots of different ideas there. Yes, so the next important question for us is what information can we gather about our students from this activity? So what information can we gather about our students from this activity? Yes, the use of their languages. That's right, Aisha, Marin, where they live. Yes, the use of English and other languages. Absolutely. So this gives a sense of their, so this could give us a sense of their social interests, activities, and community involvement. How can we feed this information into course and lesson planning? Yes, how they use different languages. So how can we use this information about our students for planning our lessons? That's right, choosing topics that are interesting for them, diversifying the activities, activating their schemata, of course, citing examples from their everyday life. Yes, that's very interesting because knowing where and why our learners use certain languages can reveal preferences of their languages, of their language use, and can also help us plan activities that are more relevant and authentic for our learners. So those were a couple of activities there to help us kick off the first term, the first day, the first week, or the first term of your academic year. All right, let's go back to the presentation. Well, this is a Google map. You could also get your students to use Google Maps, and these are the different languages that I use in different contexts. All right, let's move on. So those were some first week activities. We're now going to look at some language learning activities. Now, not being an expert in this area, when I started incorporating multilingual teaching, I buried myself in the research of last 10 to 14 years. And what did I discover? Well, I discovered pedagogical translanguaging. It sounds complicated. It isn't. It's simply something planned by the teacher inside the classroom and refers to the use of different languages for input and for output. So there are so many spontaneous moments in the classroom where you could incorporate or respond to your students' languages. But today we're also going to look at some planned ways of using their languages more strategically in the classroom. So the pre-webinar verb survey shows that many of you here already welcome your learners as languages. So here, how do you integrate your learners as languages? Something that I'd like to know. Here is a sample lesson plan. This is a secondary level, this is a secondary A2 level lesson plan. As you can see, the lesson's about film genres. So students learn about film genres. They watch a vlog about a couple of films. They check comprehension, and then they speak about the film from the vlog that they would like to watch and their favorite film genres. So how would you incorporate your students' languages in this lesson? So first of all, could you identify stages where you could incorporate their languages and tell me how you would incorporate their languages? Okay, Yasota says ask them about their favorite movies in different genres in their languages. Exploring vocabulary use in L1, absolutely. Using translation. Delia says again, translation. Yes, I would begin by bringing in inclusive material into my classroom, like we've talked about. So I would perhaps bring in film posters from my learners as well and get my learners to brainstorm film genres in their own languages before they could connect those to the target language in English. And then you could also get your learners to discuss the vlog in their languages before they check comprehension in English. And finally, while preparing for speaking as well, the learners could make notes in their languages before they do so, before they express their ideas in English. So there are different ways of actually incorporating learners as languages. Yes, Siham says activating schemata. Amira says clarifying meaning for describing pictures. Yes, those are many different ways of bringing in learners as languages. We're going to look at other ways of incorporating learners as languages as well today. So we are going to now look at the languages in the world around us. Yes, this is a kinesthetic activity, so I'd like you to participate. I'd like you to move around and look around for information presented both in English and other languages in the physical world around you. For example, I've got a sign here in two different languages, as you can see. Well, I've also got a dessert mix box from my kitchen, which has ingredients in 12 different languages and the recipe in 4 different languages. So please look for information in different languages in the physical space around you. Take some pictures if you can. Please remember no people in the pictures, especially no children. And please come back. You have, I would say, 60 seconds for this. The time starts now.
Hi, Huma. I did your task.
That's
I found a
wonderful, Melissa.
calendar. I've got a calendar that sits on my desk and it's got Basque and Spanish and English because when I work at school, we use the three languages. So
Wow,
yeah,
that's
I found
interesting.
it. I did your
Thank you, Melissa.
activity.
You were the first one.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the activity.
Wonderful. I'm already getting some responses here. Made in China label on the tray, some shampoo bottles. There's a medicine pack. There's a coffee set, some labels. Freddie says some instructions. Obviously, yes, instruction manuals. Yes, indeed. There's English and Urdu in some places. Detergents. There's a printer manual, of course, Yasoda. Some cosmetics, dolls from the UK, instructions, electronic devices and their labels, some signs. Absolutely. So it's interesting to see the number of languages floating in the world around us. And it's also interesting to note that multilingualism is way more common than we can think. Well, how do you think we could use these examples for teaching and learning in the classroom? Yes, so how could we use them for teaching and learning? Okay, for learning imperatives, for giving instructions. Yes, Freddie, you're right. Sequencing, storytelling, why not? Pictures of ingredients. Yes, to connect different languages, absolutely. For spelling, for projects. Yes, indeed. So if I were you, I would flip the learning. So I usually get my learners to look for examples of target language in English and their languages in the physical world around them. They could take pictures or share them to Padlet or Instagram. And when they come to class, they discover the rules and they practice the language, and they also make a multilingual landscape in their languages and in English for the classroom or for their home. So there are different ways of incorporating learners as languages. So basically, the strategies that are employed here are activating learners as schemata and also using contrastive analysis, that is highlighting the similarities and differences between the different languages in the classroom. All right, let's go back to my presentation. All right, so the next one is we could also use learners as languages to learn from mistakes that are caused by home language influence. So those high frequency errors. The context that I've chosen here is make and do collocations with after school activities. So what we could do here is perhaps both some sentences with the target language, or you could or you could also come up with a role play if you've got the time, but sentences are easier with the target language. The important thing is you remove the English verbs from these sentences and get your learners to fill in the gaps with verbs in their languages. Then they could compare the verbs in their languages with those sentences in English to identify the patterns so we can correct those high frequency errors that are caused by home language influence. In other words, we could use home languages to iron out errors that are caused by home languages, language influence. So this is another way of incorporating learners as languages in the classroom. Let's move on. And now we're going to look at a lesson plan here for us to look at how we can use the different languages in different stages. I'm going to show you the end product first. This lesson was about speaking and writing and about a cultural festival and making a cultural festival poster. These are some of the posters that my students made. So how do you think we could incorporate learners as languages in such a lesson, where they have to make a cultural festival poster? Yes, they could incorporate their languages in the presentation, Dragana, that's right. Siham says by celebrating the different cultural days or festivals. Leah, I request you to go back to my recording later where you could look at the previous slide. Through conversations, Nagla, I'm sorry you're having some difficulty. I suggest you leave and perhaps come back again. Using cultural songs. Yes, that's right. Yes, there are different ways. Well, I'm going to show you the lesson plan here. Well, so the lesson was about speaking and writing about a cultural festival. And as I said, making a cultural festival. The lesson stages are jumbled up. I want you to help me to put them in order. The first and the last stages are in order for you. So I set the context by showing a video of a cultural festival from my country, that was Diwali. And I initiated a discussion using English. So my students had to answer some questions about Diwali by watching the video, and they did that in English. And the last one, as you know, in their original pairs, they made their posters about festival, a cultural festival from their country, and they presented them to the class. Now, the task for you is you have to help me reorder the middle stages here. So there are four stages that have been jumbled up, A to D. Can you help me put these in order? So we set the context. What do you think will come next? Which one? A, B, C, or D? Francisca says B. Wonderful, Francisca. That's right. So you pair students by nationality and then they select a cultural festival from their country and answer some questions in their language. Indeed, yes, that was B there. So B comes next. So what after B? Amira says B, C, A, B, D, C. Okay, there are different responses here. C, B, A, and D. All right, so let's have a look here. So we set the context, and then I paired my students by nationality, which means people from the same countries came together and they selected one cultural festival and answered some questions in their language. Then I presented some model answers about the festival in from my country in English and introduced some festival related vocabulary. Students then incorporated some new language and answered those questions this time in English. As you can see in the example here on the slide. So that's an example worksheet from my class. And then students mingled and interviewed each other about their cultural festivals in English. And finally, they went back to their original groups where they worked with a partner from the same country to make their a poster about their cultural festivals and presented them to the class. So as you can see here, um, the target language and the home languages have been used strategically to help learners negotiate meaning in L1 to produce the output in L2. Let's move on. We're now going to look at bilingual texts. How could we use bilingual texts such as songs, podcasts, Instagram reels, or TikTok videos in our classroom? The strategy that I'm going to talk about is mediation. What do you think is mediation? Yes, Corinne, why not? They could make a collage and then do the poster. Why not? All right. So, what do you think is mediation? Help, using other languages, supporting students, assisting. Indeed, well, mediation when it comes to multilingual teaching goes beyond translating words from one language into to another. It includes activities such as explaining, paraphrasing, and summarizing texts. That is, using different languages for again conveying and negotiating meaning. So, to celebrate the Cultural Diversity Day at the British Council, I used a bilingual song, which was the UAE Expo 2020 theme song. It's a bilingual song in English and Arabic. I'm afraid I can't play the song for you for respecting copyright. And I use mediation with this bilingual song. So, what did I do? Well, I divided the class in two groups, Arabic speakers and speakers of all the other languages. And after the first lead in and the context setting activity, the Arabic speakers read the Arabic lyrics and others read the lyrics in English, so the English lyrics from the song. Each group made notes on key themes and phrases and they summarized those in English in their groups. Then I formed new mixed language groups or pairs, which is like jigsaw groups, which are like jigsaw groups. And the new groups compared their summaries and collaborated on a new English summary of the song. And they also presented their summaries in different ways. Some of them presented them orally, a few of them visually through posters. And there were also groups who made streamers. Here is a streamer from one of the groups depicting their favorite themes from the song. So, mediation is another strategy that we can use as teachers for incorporating different languages, for practicing higher level skills such as summarizing and paraphrasing texts in the classroom. Yes, lots of interesting ideas here. Thank you, Melissa, for sharing the link. All right, let's move on. So that was about mediation. Let's move on to some creative use of language in the classroom. Stories. So, how could we actually incorporate our learners as languages in stories? I'm sure we all agree that stories are powerful. I think all of us, each of us here today is a story. So, how could we incorporate learners as languages in stories? Fossilized stories. Corinne says the Grimm brothers using classical stories. Corinne used this recently in geography. Orally tell stories in their languages? Absolutely, yes. That's one of the first ideas here. So students could retell stories by incorporating elements of their language and culture. If you want to make it more interesting, you could also get students to role play characters in their language and in English. So they could take turns role playing the same character in English and in their language. And finally, students could also create multimodal, multilingual storybooks incorporating text, image, and video using bookcreator.com, which is a very useful app. So that was about stories. Let's move on to other creative uses of language in the classroom. The next activity is called My Language, My Emoji. I want you to think of words in your language that don't have a direct English equivalent. Can you tell us in the chat box, please? So, words from your language that don't have a direct English equivalent. For example, Jaspa in Urdu from my language doesn't have a direct English equivalent. It means a deep emotional or passionate drive or emotion. All right, different words are coming through in the chat box. Yes, could you tell us what those words are and what they mean? Some food names, yes. Okay, some verbs. They don't have equivalents in Arabic or English. Okay, ikpad bag, which can also mean a log. That's great. Very interesting. Different ideas there in the chat box. Namaste, Chido. Yes, and you could get your students to design an emoji that represents the meaning of their chosen word. For example, I have made an emoji here representing the word from my language, as I said, jazba, which means a deep emotional drive or passion. This is an AI generated image, image using imagine.art. So students could design an emoji representing the word, and then they could write a short description in English explaining the word and its cultural significance and present their emojis. You could also get them to use it more creatively through stories and poems, and they could also be compiled into an emoji dictionary. If you want to make this more authentic, you could encourage your students to send an emoji proposal to the Unicode organization that is responsible for making emoji for all of us in the world. That'd be lovely, wouldn't that be lovely? All right, so those are some creative use of languages in the classroom. There are many other ways we could incorporate learners as languages. For example, in multilingual contracts, glossaries, dictionaries. Adrian also talked about this in the previous webinar. You could also get learners to discuss reading and listening texts in their languages before they do so in English. They could also write the first draft of a paragraph about their favorite holiday, perhaps in their language before they do it in the target language. And what about journaling? As we all know, journaling is such a private activity and it's best done in a language that we know. So, why can't our learners make their journal entries about their language learning journey, both in English and their languages? This is about you, the teacher. Well, when you give feedback, well, we could give written feedback in English, but how about giving oral feedback in your learners' languages if you share languages with them? Why not? We could do that. And finally, if your school's got a newsletter, if your class has got a class magazine or a newsletter, um, we could also get parents, teachers, and students to contribute fun facts, stories, and interesting words about their languages. So, those were all some practical ideas that we've looked at. We could also use digital tools such as Reverso. Reverso provides context based translation. Sometimes literal translation can be awkward, hilarious, or inaccurate. Reverso provides context based translation. Say Hi has a conversation mode for using translation conversation mode. And of course, we looked at bookcreator.com. So we've also looked at some practical ideas for integrating students' languages. We're now going to move on to the impact of multilingual teaching on student engagement and language learning in my classroom. So I conducted research with my adult elementary learners. About 45 of them participated in my research to study the impact of these strategies on language learning. And what did I discover? Well, about 80% of my learners found the use of their languages useful for understanding complex language in the classroom, and it also positively influenced their perceptions of confidence in using difficult language inside and outside the classroom. So those are some research findings from my study. Some of the other lessons that I learned from my classroom were that multilingual teaching builds bridges between students and teachers and between teachers in the classroom and between students in the classroom by creating a pleasant learning atmosphere. It also prevents frustration and engages struggling learners. I think it's important for us to remember that when we learn to communicate in our languages, this does not just opens doors to the first language vocabulary and grammar, but to the universal vocabulary and grammar that exists in the world around us. And we need to make time and space to help our learners to use all of their linguistic repertoire for learning a new language. This is all this Using multilingual teaching is also very efficient. It saves time and effort. My research debunks the myth that learners' languages are only useful in a monolingual class. Like I've already told you that my classes are anything but monolingual. They are very, very multilingual. And my study also challenges the popular notion that teachers must know their students' languages to incorporate them. Not really, because I don't share languages with my learners. Now, like everything else in life, multilingual teaching is not free from challenges too. One of the first challenges is actually challenging teachers' attitudes towards incorporating learners' languages. And Cummins points out that this stems from traditional teacher training models, which are about a century old, and it's high time we revisit these models. So, as teachers, we need to think about equipping ourselves with skills to embrace other languages. We also need to think about adapting our course materials to leverage the different languages that exist in our classroom and look at managing student and parent expectations. So I'd like to conclude by saying that as we all know, languages are very, very powerful. They are integral to one's personality, identity, emotions, and culture. So they all must be treated equally in the classroom. Yes, English opens doors to new worlds and experiences, but those don't have to come by making one language absolute in the classroom. I have learned that all languages are capable of coexisting beautifully. That brings me to the end of my talk. Before we move on to the Q&A, I'd like you to tell me one idea that you'd like to try out and share with your colleagues from today's webinar. Emoji, Nagla says all of them. Muslima says she likes all the activities. Thank you, Salima. Emoji, emoji, all right. Stories using multilingual stories, linguistic landscape. Mihail says using linguistic landscape. Corinne says using the emoji activity. Siham says, oh, most of them using film genres. All right, thank you very much. Well, yes, I'd also like to point out that it's very important to take this conversation to our staff room at schools and language centers and involve our colleagues. I'm sure this is going to spark some exciting conversations, some discomforting conversations too, but it is important that we have these conversations so we can all build an all language friendly school or a language center. That brings me to the end of my talk. Let's throw the floor open for questions. If you want to contact me, well, you can find me on Facebook. Thank you very much for your active participation and for listening to my talk today.
Thank you so much, Huma. And yeah, I echo what you've said. Thanks for everyone for all the ideas that you're writing in the chat, in Zoom, and people are also writing lots of ideas in Facebook as well. I just want to read one comment that I've seen, which I think reflects how I feel. It's from Gungar, and it says, "I loved your session. It's full of activities." Yeah, that's what
Thank
we
you.
really liked. Um, I think people are curious about, okay, we want to bring L1s into the classroom, but we just need to know what we can do. And yeah, you gave
Absolutely.
a lot.
Thank you, Melissa.
Um, and you know, I did it. I stood up and I found in my room a trilingual item, and I really like that. I could do that in an online class, actually. That's a good one.
Yes, of course.
Wow.
I've tried that with students online, Melissa, and it works very well. It's engaging.
Uh-huh.
It gets them moving, breaks the
Yeah,
monotony. So yes, why not?
yeah. And I've also done the activity where you bring in like food from your country. I used to teach multilingual learners in Scotland, and it's one of the classes that I'll remember forever because people were so passionate and so excited to share and explain. Such a good activity. It's really great. Yeah.
Yes, that's a lovely idea, Melissa. I think languages
Um,
are so personal to all of us, aren't they?
yeah,
The whole
yeah,
world around us is filled with languages. So everything we see, this cup also means something in different
uh-huh.
languages. So yes, it's wonderful.
Yeah, that's really, really nice. So thanks you so much. Let's go to questions. There are a lot. Let's see. I saw a question from a viewer on Facebook. And his name is David, and he asks, is one of the main challenges of teaching multilingually. So we'll go now to challenges because I know there are some. Is a main challenge that institutions and parents have different expectations? Have you any tips of how to work with that? Because
Okay,
yeah,
that's
it's probably the
yeah.
reality for some people.
Yes, yes, for all of us. It's a shared problem and worry for
Yeah.
teachers all around the world, Melissa. That's a very good question, David. Thank you for asking. Well, yes, I mean, I think it's important to remember that changing the narrative around the use of home languages is not easy because this is a century-old
Mhm.
practice, and this is something that's not going to happen overnight. It's a journey. So yes, as institutions, as organizations, we need to think about building, like I said, an all language friendly school or a classroom
Mhm.
or a language center. When we look at parents, I think it's important to involve parents in this journey. This reminds me of the proverb that says that tell me and I may forget, show me and I may remember, and involve
Mhm.
me and I will understand. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to involve parents in this journey. So perhaps by having some information sharing
Mhm.
sessions, by sharing best practices and research studies that have been conducted by teachers with their students in the classroom and those success stories. So I think it's important to make them a part of this journey. journey. Also, by having
Yeah.
cultural events where parents could actually come in and talk about their culture in their languages
Uh-huh.
and in English and bring in materials from their different culture. I think these are some of the ways where we can try to challenge this narrative around the use of other languages in our classroom. But we must know that there
Yeah.
will be some resistance. It is
Yeah.
natural to expect some resistance because it's a century old practice and it's going to take some time to actually change this policy.
Yeah, it's like the generational change with the shift between kind of grammar translation method into more
Absolutely.
communicative. Maybe parents or institutions might think about how they learned a language and they weren't allowed to bring their home languages, but
Yes.
I mean generations are changing and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really optimistic about the future and I think that this
Me
is
too, Melissa.
becoming more common, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And also
Yeah.
from the British Council as an organization, we can expect a lot of interesting things around
Yeah.
multilingualism soon. So, yes, why not?
Yeah, it's definitely something we're promoting in all ways that we can. So there's lots of information on teachingenglish.org.uk. If you type in the search bar multilingual, you'll find courses, other webinars, lots of things
Yes.
there. So yeah, lots. Let's go to a question which is about writing, which is maybe something we didn't talk about a lot. So let's hear your opinion. It's from Shiroita, and Shiroita asks, uh, do you have any suggestions about when learners create a draft of a piece of writing in their first language? If you don't understand their language, how do you guide? Do you provide any feedback on this draft? Is that is that anything you have experience with, Huma?
Yes, I have, and that's a good question, Shiroita. I
Okay.
hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Yes, like I said, I don't share languages with my learners. So I think one of the tools, strategies that I use in my classroom is peer support and peer teaching. So, and because I usually
Yeah.
teach adult learners, it's easily doable. So I often get
Hmm.
learners who share languages to come together to review the draft and to help each other. And as we all know, they don't have to be perfect. Well, so we're using home languages here for mediation, for assisting, for supporting our learners to express their ideas. Because when we ask our learners to read, to speak, and write only in English, it's like putting speed bumps in their way. So I think you could ask your learners to write a text in English and you could tell them, can you fill in ideas that you cannot express in English with using your languages? And maybe
Yeah.
they could use AI. We have lots of AI tools now, well, like Reverso, the one that I shared, Reverso. So that's not an
Hmm.
AI, but that's just a website. So they could use AI and other online tools to help them check their draft, or they could get support from their peers. But it's important to remember that those drafts don't have to be perfect. So no, I
Yeah.
have never been able to give feedback to my learners in that situation because I don't share languages, but I have used peer teaching and online tools to get them to work with their drafts.
Yeah, two really good solutions. I mean, and another way you could work with writing is that the research stage, the looking things up on the internet, that can be done
Yes,
in any language because then the
absolutely.
output is English, right?
Yes, of course, we could get learners to brainstorm, predict, research information online in their languages
Uh-huh.
before they report those ideas in English. Why not?
Uh-huh. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions coming in. Yeah, there are lots. Oh, I'm interested in this one. It says, my students always want to play Kahoot. So that online game where everyone votes on the answer.
Yes.
Do you have any kind of gamifying suggestions where the home language is included? Any ideas? Sorry
Yes,
to
of
throw that
course.
on you.
No, not at all. There are so many ideas. If you look at online tools, you mean you have Kahoot and you have also Quizlet that can be
Oh
used
yeah.
in different languages. And
Uh-huh.
you could also convert all the other physical games that you play with your learners, the fly swatter game, the bingo game, all of those you could incorporate learners as languages. For example, we talked about learning from mistakes using home languages. You could also
Yeah.
turn that into a bingo game game where learners could make their own bingo cards with verbs, those
Hmm.
collocations in English and their
Hmm.
languages, and they could play
Yeah.
that game in pairs and in groups. So why not? So all of the games that we play in the classroom
Mhm.
in the target language can also be played using our learners' languages. And you could also
Yeah.
have extra
Great.
points. If learners are able to pick up words in other languages, you could say that you will get an extra
Uh-huh.
point if you could give me a word in another language. So why not?
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
I would play that game.
Yes, I have done that. The lesson that I talked about film genres. So, at the end of
Uh-huh.
that lesson, when I reviewed the film genres, I played a game where learners had to, obviously, it was a quiz, and the groups that could give me the genres, even in other languages, in the classroom, got an extra point. So, why not?
Yay, we love points. Um, well, we're going to have to say goodbye for now, Huma, but there's lots of questions. But don't worry, everyone, because Huma's coming back. She's coming back with Adrienne on the 1st of August on Facebook to do a live question and answer session.
Yes.
So if you enjoyed her webinar, their webinars today, then look at our Facebook page, British Council Teaching English, and join us for that. We're going to have to say goodbye, Huma.
Thank you very
So,
much for having me here, Melissa, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming today and for participating actively. I'd also like to thank everybody, behind the scenes helping me
yeah,
and supporting me today, Joe and Kath, and of course you,
yeah.
Melissa. Thank you very much for everything.
Thanks very much. And also, Wiam, who's been moderating on Facebook. So, we'll have a 15-minute break and then we're back with three teachers who have some other ideas of how to work with multilingualism in their classes. So, don't go away. We'll be back shortly. Take
Wow.
care. Goodbye for now.
See you. Bye bye.